Peep time. We are almost to the end of our shot process and our shot routine. Worked on stance, we've worked on grip, we've worked on shoulder, worked hard on the anchor, talked about cause and effect of all those to get to this, the PEEP. PEEP sight is so critical, and it's important that it is a step in your shot routine, critical component of the shot routine, and it has to stay exactly where it's at in that sequence. Here's why. A lot of people look at that PEEP sight as how they're going to aim on the target right away, and they think of a PEEP sight the same as like a scope on a firearm, where they're just bringing that up and they're wanting to look through it. And if all they're focused on is looking through that scope and not actually going through the process of shouldering that firearm correctly, then what happens? That's when people get scoped. I've done it too as a kid. And it's because I didn't do what was first, and that is properly shouldering it and then bringing that head down to the correct position and having that scope, either the height of the scope or the eye relief of that scope, in a position to where you're able to get that clear picture when the rest of your technique is the same. And that's what we have to translate over into archery. Because with archery, we have a triangle. As soon as we pull that bow back, this straight string becomes a triangle. And that triangle is not, we're not able to open it up or close it down. That triangle is going to stay the same. And so we have to make sure that our anchor position is correct, and depending on either the height or the decline of our shot, we may have to slightly adjust our head. Or with anyone that has a movable sight, if your sight is all the way at the top of its elevation and you have this peephole, think about it like this. If you're looking through a peephole at a hotel and I'm standing outside of it and my chin is right there at the top edge of that peephole, you're going to kind of have to crunch down and look up to see me, all right? Whereas if Jim Miller is at your door, you're going to be able to see him by looking down like that. So with a PEEP sight on a bow, if your sight is low for these longer shots, then when your anchor is correct and you're looking through the PEEP with your head in the correct position, you might be looking down through it a little bit more, and sometimes your anchor might feel a little bit off compared to when that sight is all the way at the top and you're here at 20 yards, and now you've kind of got to put a little bit more pressure on the string so that you can look up through that PEEP to properly center that front sight and then this rear sight, which is your peephole, okay? Your head position is going to change some, but you don't want to change your anchor position to where that triangle is moving around. So that's why the PEEP is after the anchor. What I want you to always be in the habit, and if you've watched me shoot and you go by and you watch, a lot of times when I'm drawing back, I'm either looking at the target or I'm actually looking down at like my hand and my arrow on the rest. But one thing I am not looking at is this PEEP sight. When I see people raise their bow to the target like this, and then I watch their attention go like that, they are looking at this PEEP. And I've seen people all the time, hunters, tournament archers, and they just watch that PEEP all the way, and then they just try to fit in here so they can look through it. And now look at my anchor, totally different. I'm worried about the PEEP. My anchor's back here floating. My shoulders compressed up and back. Horrible situation. We got to maintain our posture. We have to have, our posture needs to be solid. We need to have this rear arm parallel to the front arm. We need our anchor in the position that puts our arrow shaft in the safe part of our face. And then we slightly adjust our head depending on where we have that front sight and what we're seeing once we then look through that peephole. Okay, so in a perfect situation, I'd raise up, I'm looking at the target, I'm drawn back, I'm actually thinking about my anchor right now, and now that's kind of when I personally squint my left eye, I really get in here and make sure I'm centering properly. And at this distance, I don't have to have a lot of nose pressure to see through there. Now, if I was shooting further, I might feel like I was floating a little bit, looking down through that peep. But that's why when I'm shooting a longer distance, sometimes you see me relax my jaw a little bit. I'll just relax my jaw so that my anchor feels the same, and I'm able to still keep my head straight and then look through that peep properly to properly center for that sight being really low. All right, now here's another critical thing to think about when it comes to the peep sight. You have to make sure that the front sight and the rear sight, both are 2 circles. We've got a circle here. That's why, like on our sights that we offer, I really prefer a white ring. Simple white ring, because I have a black circle back here. I've got a white ring. So if I'm off, I see that white disappear, or I see daylight on the side of it, and I know that that is off. Because, you know, if you look at, if your peep is on the edge of this scope one time, and then the next time you're covering that white, well, think of that width right there, and then think of how that exact same width would relate to your sight. If you were to loosen that sight and move it that far, which is the same as the width of that, you're going to impact very differently, right? Got to get that back while I'm remembering. So your front sight and your rear peep orientation is critical. And the more you can maintain your posture and bring that peep over to where you need to be as an archer, and you can bring that over into that line of sight, it's going to be much better for your consistency. So one of the things that I was taught when it came to my peep acquisition is if I'm standing, my target's here, standing facing forward, and if I were to mimic archery technique, so raise my bow arm to the target, and I'm going to bring this into a parallel position, my anchor's going to be where it needs to be. If I just turn my head to where my chin is now coming in line with the target and over my shoulder, my head should still be straight up and down. Now, if you have a bow that has a very sharp string angle, you might feel like you have to bring your nose down to that string, and when the triangle's too low, you're going to have to do that to find that. And that's why some people prefer a little bit longer axle bow, so that that triangle is not making them go to the string. So I always imagine my head just being able to pivot like this. If my neck couldn't move towards the bow, which is a huge mistake people make, and again, this comes from people that aren't thinking about posture and anchoring first, then finding the peep. That's why peep is after the anchor. Forget about the peep. Imagine that thing is not even in the string until you're here, and then all of a sudden it appears, and then you got to look through it. Because otherwise, what happens if people do what I told you, and they just look at this thing and just worry about getting in here? Well, you can see I got a ton of facial pressure. Likewise, sometimes if people change their anchor position first, well then, you know, they're trying to like totally figure out where this peep is because they weren't focused on just getting that anchor and the slight adjustments for your head. Now, when it comes to PEEP position, if you're shooting uphill, if you're shooting down out of a tree stand, again, that triangle on a compound bow is the same all the time. So that's why in a hunting situation, if I'm able to draw level and then pivot at my waist to the animal, that's what I'd prefer to do. You can't always do that and not get detected from the movement. So in a worst case scenario, I would try to cut that difference in half, and that way I can just focus on, stance, grip, shoulder, down and forward, drawing back. I'm gonna anchor, find my tip of the string, looking through my PEEP, and now I can bend the rest of the way down to that animal. So PEEP after the anchor, so important, because the longer you're trying to align that front sight and that rear sight and get the pin on the target and level the bubble, and then this feels weird, so you start messing around with this, that's all wasted time in the pocket that is going to instantly start to just decline accuracy. That's when the misses happen. PEEP after the anchor. Think of your head being on just a swivel. It can pivot like this, and work on finding your anchor to where you get that PEEP to be as close to the perfect position as possible with the least amount of head movement possible. And this is just going to come from you doing the reps on the steps in the systematic process. Stance, grip, shoulders down, forward, draw, anchor, and there's my PEEP. Now all I'm going to do is the next step, which you'll find out next time.